a friend of mine, he asked me not to mention his name, lives in Chicago. I'll call him Mark Firestone. Calls me up and he says, Jolie, I gotta share with you this amazing story that happened to me. I said, go. He says every night before he goes to sleep, he reads a book and he falls asleep like that. He says, one night he was reading the book called Shlomi. It's published by Art Scroll. It's a book about Shlomi Gross, a very big philanthropist, a person who had a giant, giant heart. Helped anybody and everybody. And he passed away suddenly, tragically, when he was just 50 years old. So the writer charges the reader with a mission and tells the reader, next time you have an opportunity to do chesed, ask yourself, what would Shlomi do? Mark says, great. So I was so inspired, finished the book, closed it, turned off the lights, and was getting ready to go to sleep. My cell phone rings. Pick up the phone. It's a Belzer Chusid. His name is Pinchas Lerner, true name. Doesn't mind if I mention his name. From Borough Park. He was in Chicago. He says, Mr. Firestone, we heard a lot about you. We'd like to come over and ask you for a donation. Now, Mark, never sees anybody in his home because he used to see people in his home and he had long lines and he had to stop. It was disrupting family life. And he never sees anybody at 10:30 at night when he's in his pajamas, ready to go to sleep. Then he asks himself, what would Shlomi do? He just finished the book. So what would Shlomi do? He says, come over in 10 minutes. Gets dressed, goes downstairs, and Rabbi Lerner comes in 10 minutes. He tells him he's collecting for the Bells and Moises in Yerushalayim, and they're short, and they need a donation. Mr. Firestone is a big philanthropist. He knows of bells. He says, look, I'll give you $26,000. $26,000 now. For a man you never met before, that's your first time asking him for a donation, I think that's pretty nice. This guy Lerner wasn't happy. He says, the truth is, Mr. Firestone, I came here and we plan to ask you for exactly double that, $52,000. Mark Firestone says, what? Thinks to himself, 10:30 at night, you come to my house, I offer you $26,000 and you're asking me for double? Then he asks himself, what would Shlomi do? He says, give me some of your contacts, some of the organizations, some of the people that have donated who know you, and I'll call you back tomorrow. Tomorrow, the next day, Firestone calls Rabbi Lerner and he says, I want to tell you something. I never do this. I've never given more than 26. I've never seen anyone in my house at 10:30 at night. But I want you to be aware, I read this book last night, Shlomi, and I was charged with a mission by the writer. What would Shlomi do? And I was inspired. Come over, I'll give you a $52,000 check. He comes over, takes the $52,000 check, goes home. The next day, Pinchas Lerner calls Mark Firestone. He says, you called me yesterday, you gave me a nice check. I have a story for you. You see, when you told me about Shlomi Gross, I got to tell you, I knew Shlomi Gross very, very well. We were very close. In fact, I accompanied the Aron to Eretz Yisrael after the Levaya. I remember a few weeks before he died, I went to his office and I asked him for a donation for bells. And I asked him for $26,000. And Shlomi told me, he said, he doesn't have the funds available now, but he promises me he'll give me the money for bells. And then he was left there. He never fulfilled his promise. Turns out you were willing to give 26, but the other 26 that I asked of you was inspired by Shlomi Gross. Thank you for paying off his debt.